It's 7:01. Is there anybody who wishes to engage in public participation? Seeing none. Jane?
Yep. Everybody see my screen?
Yep.
So just the high school is the first item on the agenda tonight. So we just have a few items on our agenda. We'll go through some meeting minutes from the previous meeting. We'll look at the schedule, the budget, some upcoming meetings, and then we'll hand it over to SMA to talk a little bit about the existing condition surveys and inspections that they've done to date. So the first item is the meeting minutes of October 7th. They were sent out today for review.
So the voting members of the committee, do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the minutes
Thank
from
you,
November, from
October
what's-
7th?
October 7th.
I'll
Thank-
second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Who was the second, Michelle?
It was Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Any discussion? Hearing none, is there any objections to the minutes? All in favor? Minutes are approved unanimously.
Thank you. Second item is the schedule. So since the last time we met, we have reviewed the schedule and we've pushed it out a little bit. There was some concern about the PDP submitting it right after the holidays. It was January 5th was the day we were looking at. Given where we are with the visioning, with the surveys and inspections in the existing building, and coming up to the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, we were a little bit concerned about rushing the review of the different options, getting those out publicly and presenting them to the building committee. So we're looking to push the submission of the PDP about a month to January 27th. That will give us time to have a couple more public forums and also a couple more building committee meetings before we actually have to submit that to MSBA end of January, early February. That will push the PSR. I mentioned at the last meeting, the MSBA meets every other month. They meet 6 times a year. So pushing that schedule out a month for PDP pushes out that whole cycle. So we're now proposing to do the PSR early May and go to the MSBA Board of Directors meeting in June of 2022. Pending approval of our preferred solution. At that meeting, we will move straight into schematic design. And we are looking to submit the schematic design the end of October 2022, which will mean a MSBA board meeting December 21st, 2022. So it pushes it out two-month cycle. But we think that's the best for the project to allow us enough time to do the PDP properly, to examine the different options, to present that to the public, present that to the building committee, and allow us enough time to make those submissions. So we've pushed the schedule out. I've attached the more detailed schedule here, which outlines the tasks during the different submissions to MSBA. But that's where we are right now.
Jane, do you need a vote on changing that schedule?
I don't think we need a vote, Joe. I'll just notify MSBA. We have to submit a monthly report by the 12th of the month, every month. So I'll just notify them that we've pushed the cycle out from the October 22 board meeting for approval to the December meeting.
Joe, if there's no objection, I think it would be good to take a vote, because sometimes MSBA asks if the SBC has voted on it.
Okay, so can I hear a motion to amend the schedule? The voting members,
Move to approve the revised schedule as presented.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
That was you, Tom, right?
It's Mark.
Mark, sorry.
My first second.
Yeah, there you go. I knew you'd make it, Mark. All right, I'm just a roll call. Janine,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
I don't know, Chip, are you on yet? I didn't think so. John,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and Mark.
Yes.
I miss anyone? Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just our updated budget for this month.
Someone has a hand up. Jonathan?
Thank you. Just a quick question. From a timing standpoint, I'm assuming that pushes us beyond next November's town meeting in terms of a town funding vote?
It does. It's something we need to discuss with the town administration. It is possible to take a vote before MSBA approves a project. There's a number of towns have done that. So it's something we need to discuss over the next few weeks and months, the strategy of whether we go to the town before MSBA approves the project or if we wait until 2023 and have a special town meeting.
At the time of the town meeting, we will have already submitted the schematic design and will already have had a budget established. So at that point, we would probably also have met with MSBA to review that and be confident that going into the MSBA Board of Directors meeting, that they would be satisfied with the budget we would be presenting. So theoretically, you could vote this at town meeting in November or by a special election in January, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, obviously something I think we should have some more discussion about just to understand the implications of all of that and, the timing for folks to be able to review, the schematic design before we vote on it.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other questions on the schedule? Okay,
Just an updated budget. There's been no changes to the budget since we last presented it. I've just updated it for the invoices that were approved last month. They show here in the actual spent to date column. We didn't submit a propay to MSBA last month. We were under 50,000, so we will after the next billing committee and before the end of November, we'll submit another one. But there's been no changes to the budget line items. I've just updated it to show the invoices that have been approved. Any questions on that? Okay. And then just the next item. So we've been trying to tie some of the public meetings in with that schedule and the revisions. So again, this is just a outline of the upcoming meetings during the PDP and the PSR, and so people can put them on their calendars. And we will confirm these as we get closer to the dates for the individual meetings. But this is what we're looking at for the PDP and the PSR. So over the next month, we're here tonight for the billing committee. We have a public forum next week where we're going to discuss the educational visioning. We've had 2 educational visioning meetings so far. We have 2 to go. So we'll update the public on the progress of those. Also going to talk a little bit about the existing conditions report, which we're going to talk about in a moment here tonight. We have our 3rd workshop, November 16th. Next building committee meeting will be November 18th. And then the final educational visioning workshop will be November 30th. And we'll then update the public on that after that. We have gotten a number of you who have submitted requests to be on the various focus groups. We're just going through that with the school administration. And we'll be finalizing those in the next week or so. So we'll notify people of which groups they're on if they've submitted requests to be on those groups. And then, as I said, this just pushes the meeting dates out. So take a look at this, subject to change, but we will confirm as we get closer to the meetings, just so people know what the commitment is and what's coming up.
Shane, it's Phil. Could you send this out as its own document? This
I
whole,
can,
this,
yep.
this spreadsheet with all these things on it?
I will, yeah. It's updated regularly, Phil, but certainly I'll send it out. You know, we'll confirm on the website. I put all these meetings on the website that we know, but certainly I can send this out to the group.
Any other questions?
I was looking, Shane, at this is John at the project Facebook page, and some of these events they aren't on there yet. I was just wondering if those will be updated on there. Is that kept up to date in line with the website as well?
Yeah, I'll have to coordinate that, John. I don't do the Facebook. I do the websites. Well, I'll make sure those are coordinated.
Okay.
But I would use the website as the kind of determining place to go.
Wakefield, the Wakefield Memorial High School Building Project Facebook page has the 4 educational visioning sessions included on there. And it also has the public forum noted on there as well.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the November 10th one. I just didn't see anything after that.
Right. I think what's happening is the town's website is also posting on, the Facebook page is also posting. And that one, because they have more followers and whatnot, is getting the first one you see. But if
I
you
gotcha.
type in the Wakefield Memorial High School Building Project Facebook, it'll come up.
Okay, I'll take a look. Thanks.
Any other questions? On the meeting schedule and agenda? All right,
And that's all I had tonight.
all right, Lorraine or Helen, who?
So I think Matt Rice needs to be made host, Joe, to present. Matthew Rice.
Okay, all right,
We
I think
have
it's
a
Matt,
number
right?
of our team with us here tonight to go through it. Helen has set up the agenda, but we've been through the building. She's going to give an overview, and then we'll be brief. We know you have a full agenda tonight. Helen?
Matthew Rice?
Yes, please, Joe. Matthew Rice.
Great, thanks, Lorraine. Yes, I do want to introduce the team members here. Many of them have set their own eyes and feet on the building and on the site. So Matt Rice is the project architect for this project, and Ben Williams is an architect who also has done much of the survey work. We also have Erin Prestilio. She's our civil engineer who will talk about the site observations. And we do have Nick Ferzaka with AEI, our electrical consultant for the project. So they will delve into a bit of detail and give you an overview of what we've seen thus far. Those are the disciplines and the order in which we will go. So looks like Erin will be up first.
Okay, so we'll start with site. The thing about site is that many of these things you are aware of because they're things that you can see, unlike things that are behind walls and below ground. So big takeaways here that we found is that first and foremost, the fields are in obviously great shape. They are very well maintained. So that is definitely a positive. The condition of, there's one internal courtyard. The condition of that is in fair condition. It's also the only space that you have for outdoor learning. And so we also observed that because of that, there was actually some students and classes that were on the Beasley Oval. There's also an overall lack of pedestrian circulation. So if you're in the building and you're trying to get to these great field spaces, you'll have to walk through parking lots. And that's something that we're going to want to get into once we start to develop the site piece of all of these different options. We observed there's 4 school buses, but kind of an overall lack of on-site parking. The parking seemed to be inadequate. And again, that's something that we want to be aware of as we kind of move forward with designs. The loading dock was also inadequate and in poor condition. I'm sorry, Matt, we have some photos of these on the next slide that show some of these. Again, these are all things that you see, so you may be well aware of some of these items. If you go to the next slide, I just wanted to speak briefly about some of our work with our consultants. Our site survey will begin field work next week. Geo-environmental, traffic, and wetlands, those studies are all underway. We did complete 17 geoprobes last week, the end of last week. They were completed between 1 and 15 feet. They identified different types of soil material, topsoil, sand, some buried organics, and fill. And about half of them hit rock, and we don't know if that's bedrock or a cobble or a boulder, but that's what we have so far. And that's it for site.
So I'm Ben Williams. I'm speaking for our structural engineer on the project, Paul Levinoy, tonight, as he wasn't able to join us. In terms of the structure, he had observed during his walkthroughs that the structural systems throughout the school are broken up into mainly 2 different categories, or 2 different vintages rather. For the 1960s portion of the building, which is shown in the diagram to the right in pink. And then in yellow is the 1970 additions, in which there's a different structural system indicated in yellow, just to kind of orient you and locate where those systems are in the building. Generally, the systems are in good to very good condition, so that's great news for the project. Originally, 1960s structure was composed of one-way concrete joists. Essentially, that's where the floor slab was formed along with the floor joists and all poured together, encased in concrete. Those slabs were then supported by a grid constructed of concrete beams and columns. In the 1970s area, it's composed of steel framing and columns, composed of girders and beams and trusses and things of that nature. Generally speaking, there wasn't any major structural cracking noticed throughout his walkthroughs. His observations were generally minor in general, where you saw sort of caps at the tops of exterior walls where precast spandrel panels met the top of the roof and transitioned to the roof. You had points where different joints and the seams had failed. So water had been getting into those locations and causing some spalling, so splitting of the face of precast stone, or in some cases, like we've probably noticed, the chimney, the top cap had failed sealant joints, and so you saw some impact on the brick. All those were considered and will be mentioned in the report. In terms of the building enclosure, which talks more directly to the architecture on the project, I think most of these things, likewise, you've already heard about in some respect. Roof systems generally are inadequate to insulate the building. They've got an extremely low ability to hold in heat. We measured that in something called an R value, and I think you measured probably around between a 5 and 8, which is extremely low in its ability to maintain heat inside the building. In many areas, water has infiltrated underneath the membranes. Deterioration of the seams are prevalent throughout. You have bubbles forming underneath the membrane, which indicate water is still there. Other areas where fixes have happened over time, you can see that maybe poor workmanship for some of the sealant is not fully sealing up where it should. Flashing where the membrane meets the wall. An example in the photo that you're seeing with the brick has oxidized, it's past its life, it's no longer able to fully transition sort of water out, off of the wall onto the roof and then to the drains that are over the roof surface. Exterior wall systems consist of composite masonry walls, the face brick masonry back or CMU backup. It's all grouted solid. Generally, those also have a very low ability to maintain heat inside the building. Typical buildings are significantly much higher. I think we are suggesting that we've looked at this and think it's about a R4. Typical buildings nowadays can be between probably about R25 to R30 or even higher, depending on the sustainable goals. There are a few exterior expansion joints throughout the project or throughout the building, which lends itself towards movement and cracks and especially at the corners, especially where you have the 1970s and 60 building meeting. Throughout, it's common to see sealant joints and failing, where you have brick meeting windows, where you have sills at windows, things like that. At louvers, consistently also showing sealant failures. At the field house, we've seen 2-inch insulated metal panel systems. The panel systems themselves had a coating over time that has deteriorated, oxidized the metal, starting to expand and contract and delaminate those panels in their ability to do what they're supposed to do, keep out water and also maintain temperature in that space. Window framing vary in material construction. None of them are thermally broken. They all have single pane glass and again, show signs of sills deteriorating. Safety and egress is something we've been paying attention to. Classrooms, corridors aren't adequately separated with fire rated walls. Spaces, reasonable spaces are responsible for discharging people in a safe way. And the spaces are sort of allowing for the transfer of fire and smoke and not providing enough compartmentalization. Doors are held open with wedges, and so where they probably want to be connected to a fire alarm system through a system of magnetic hold opens that would close in the case of a fire. Door hardware throughout is not accessible. Door pulls at exterior egress doors create some security challenges in general. Stairs, guardrails, handrails don't necessarily meet dimensional expectations and so forth. Landings, elevators all need to be looked at a little bit further. General education spaces, a number of all of them are composed of masonry partitions, spline ceilings, flooring made of hazardous material. 1970s building features similar construction, masonry, ceiling tiles, and hard flooring. A lot of the spaces were designed to be open, but had later been partitioned off and created for spaces that are poor acoustically. Likewise, spaces that saw operable partitions are not being used as they were originally intended. Furniture doesn't quite meet the goals of modern learning, and window shades, operable windows do not quite meet, are not functional. Bathrooms, locker rooms, and so forth are falling short in that the toilet fixtures, the accessories inside aren't within accessible reach, and don't necessarily meet the space requirements needed to access those fixtures. Locker rooms in the field house also are generally in poor condition, as is true for the showers.
Guess that hands it over to me. Many of the things you probably know about already, but the building consists of two independent secondary services. One that was, the original 1960s, and one for the 1970s. But both are original to the building. Very common in this kind of construction. All the equipment is what we call, Federal Pacific is a manufacturer. It's very common around that time, but is no longer in business. And you just can't find parts, circuit breakers, things like that. So it's operating, but it's really not something that is, operable for the long term. Similarly, there are two generator systems for the buildings, again, in the 1960s and the 1970s. Both generators are operating, but the systems are non-compliant to today's standard in that you have to separate emergency and light optional standby systems. So aside from the head end generator being old, the actual distribution from that generator system is non-compliant either. You would have to have separate transfer switches for emergency, separate for optional standby, which is like for kitchen equipment, things like that, versus emergency lighting. For the fire alarm systems, there was a recent replacement of the head end. What you see on the right is the original, what's considered a zoned fire alarm system, but they have the head end has been replaced with an addressable system, which is what everything is. You know, any building of this size is an addressable system. But it's very common where they'll take and put an addressable system head end and tie over all the zones. So all the original wiring out to the devices is original, but it's tied to the head end to an addressable head end. Aside from that, the system has a notification devices, which are horn strobes. And nowadays, educational use group is required to have speakers. So the system in general is not code compliant anymore. And in general, fire alarm systems have a life of around 15 years before the technologies just are no longer serviced by the service company. So again, the original zone system is in the 40 to 50-year-old, even though the head end is 10 years old. The lighting systems in the building were mostly linear fluorescent systems. Under utility rebate programs, they were retrofitted with T8 T8 lamps, electronic ballasts. Still, again, an updated fluorescent technology. As you're probably aware, nowadays everything is LED. The systems are operable. They're functioning. The lighting quality is not what would be considered appropriate for standards of today, but it is operating, and we can certainly operate in the near future, but it doesn't really provide the quality of the environment that you would like. The lighting controls are primarily manual switches, and nowadays, with the energy codes, you have to have automatic control throughout the entire building. So the controls do not meet the energy code. There's a whole series of auxiliary systems, public address, master clocks, so forth, which are all, again, they're all original to the building. I didn't write about those as well, but the summary is really most of this electrical systems are pretty original to the building. And yeah.
Thank you, Nick. And again, my name is Matt Rice. I am an architect, but I'm going to run through the HVAC systems and the plumbing systems for our engineers that walked through and did the survey. The short story here, obviously, is that most of the HVAC equipment has exceeded its life expectancy. That's to be expected from a 1960 and 1972 construction, just given the equipment that we're dealing with. This includes the boilers, boiler room, including the steam and hot water distribution piping in many of the crawl spaces that exist. There is a series of underground tanks for fuel oil located just outside the loading area, something to be investigated and dealt with on the site side of things. Many of the chillers fall into that category of having outlived their useful life. We know that there is a very new chiller that was put in recently for the cafeteria, and that while it's in good condition, it still is sort of the minority in terms of the overall equipment within the building. There's older pneumatic HVAC controls that are just outdated at this point. And as well, the condensing boilers, which are newer in terms of the boiler equipment, their venting has already started to rust and deteriorate a bit. So that would need to be relocated, as well as the hot water pumps and piping that are associated with that. Again, the chillers I mentioned, their operation all would need to be verified in terms of making sure that they're achieving what they are designed for. And again, their pumps on the cold water side, and chilled water side of things, needs replacement. Unit ventilators provide ventilation to the classroom spaces, primary learning environments, and their piping require replacement. Fin tube radiation, cabinet unit heaters, the air systems, ductwork, associated components serving cafeterias, etc., all requiring replacement. rooftop equipment in that same category, as well as the roof exhaust fans. And on the plumbing side, very similar story there. Again, most of the system in distribution is of original vintage, and so came as expected, has outlived its useful life. Exception would be the domestic water heaters that are less than 5 years old, but the piping that's feeding those heaters, again, is original. Gas piping, some of that was installed to feed one of those generators that Nick was talking about, which was converted over from oil to gas at a certain point. And then the sanitary and storm piping, original, again, at a certain vintage at this point. And then, as Ben had noted, the plumbing fixtures, both in terms of water efficiency as well as accessibility, are in need of replacement. And lastly, the fire protection system. So installed in 1975, good vintage at this point, close to 50 years. There are 3 different fire water services coming into the building. So that would be something that we'd be looking to make more efficient and centralized as part of any renovation project, even bringing up to code. And a new sprinkler system that would be fully code compliant would be required in any scenario. And then lastly, I just wanted to close with another bit of the site exploration that we have been doing over the course of the past couple of weeks. Some people may have seen our drone operator out on site walking throughout and getting some really valuable digital information for us to work with. This is an image that sort of bridges that fine line between a physical model and digital reality. It's what we call a photogrammetry model. And so this drone flies through and actually creates a photorealistic model, digital model that we can work with and will work with as we create design studies for the project going forward to share with the community. And again, it's looking to leverage some additional insight into the overall site for us. I think we went through schedule already, so I don't think there's anything else we need to say here. And that was the extent to what we wanted to cover with you. Not sure if we want to pause for any questions or keep moving.
I had one. Helen?
Yep.
Previously, there was a map shown of the geotechnical, that was done on the baseball field. And there was going to be about 8 or 10 pits that were dug, but I only see 4. Is there a reason, or are they going to do more?
I think this is what they determined, and this does represent what was done. And maybe Erin can speak to why fewer maybe were done than perhaps were originally proposed.
Yes, so that's a really, really great point. So the image that Matt has scrolled to is the 17 that were completed. And that concludes this phase of testing. We had circulated a plan showing upwards, it was 20-22 borings or something. And what we like to do is overestimate in the event that we can complete more borings, because we buy the equipment we bought the equipment for 2 days. And so in the event we can really get going, we want to make the most of our time. And because we have to go through the process of with DigSafe and with local utilities, working with the DPW and the school, we identify probably more than we know we can get through in the event something happens and we can really kind of crank through it. But
Okay.
This is what was completed, and this is what it concludes the testing for this phase.
So to follow up on Joe's question, we know that if you build a new building to the right of Hemlock Road on the baseball field, would you expect to do more boring?
Yes.
If that's a goal that or a
Yes.
direction we're going?
Yep, we will complete additional soil borings during
Okay,
schematic
you should
design.
know there's a river that flows under that field.
I have heard, yep.
Thus, I don't think 4 is what we need.
Yes,
So,
a river runs through it. Yes.
yeah. And the other question I had was on the structural side of things. I know when we had a structural survey done a few years ago, They mentioned that the 1960s building couldn't be brought up to seismic codes of today, and I didn't hear any of that being mentioned.
So our opinion is that we think it's in good to very good condition. As for the masonry walls that are there, I think one of the things that we will be paying greater attention to is making sure that they are clipped back to structure. Because one of the things that we noted is that they, in some cases, are not. Say, in case of seismic, for example, they need to be braced. And that's an example of how one of the measures that would need to be taken.
And
Okay.
just to add on to that, so that's for the masonry walls, but the structural system itself does need to be, you know, if this building was renovated and depending upon the level of renovation as defined by the code, it would need to be structurally braced from the structure point of view. It's not that it can't be done. It will reduce more square footage because you're going to have to go in there and add in brace frames. We did this to the concrete frame building in Winchester. So it can be done. It is, I would say it is more expensive than traditional than to a steel frame system. And then it does start to eat away at square footage. So that is just a consideration that has to be taken into account.
Right. Okay, so yeah, that's all. I mean,
Okay.
I was just concerned that we're saying the structural system is good to very good, yet it doesn't meet any of the current day seismic codes.
So it's good to very good for its existing condition.
Okay.
We're not saying what happens to it when we start touching it.
Good enough.
You know? Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a structural question? What percentage of the structure do you look at to be able to define if it's good to very good? Like, you know what I mean? It's a pretty big, vast structure. So how much did you look at to come to the conclusion that it's good to very good?
So I think it's a visual survey that we're able to do. I mean, we're not ripping apart enclosures on things to be able to get eyes on every piece of it. So I'm not sure what exact percentage we could say that we were able to view because most of it is concealed. But we tend to go in and look in spaces that have exposed structural areas, the custodial closets, the boiler rooms. And on a percentage basis, maybe that's 10 or 15% throughout, but it is fairly typical in terms of how we evaluate the structures at this point in the process. And as we move forward, if, for instance, we're looking more intensely at an ad reno scheme or a renovation scheme for whatever reason, we would certainly do destructive investigation to peel back those layers and get some more information just to make sure we're doing our due diligence on the overall scope of things. This is sort of preliminary level analysis that we're doing.
Okay, this is my first time going through something like this. That's so there's if it looks like the reno is looking like an option, there's more looking done
exactly
at all these systems, I would guess. So okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions regarding the existing condition survey? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anything else, Shane? For the high school?
No, I don't have anything, Joe.
Lorraine or Helen, anything else?
Nope.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Good questions, group. Keep us on our toes.
Well, we try.
We haven't even started yet.
Well, he hasn't.
All right. Good night. Thank you, everybody.
All right, good night.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the portion of the high school. They did more surveys and they're going to be report more on in 2 weeks. Shane, you want to go to the public safety building?
Yep. So just a quick update on the public safety. We'll just look at the meeting minutes from the previous one. We'll take a look at the updated budget, and then we'll talk a little bit about the subcontractor bids and preparation for town meeting this weekend. So meeting minutes were distributed for review.
Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the October 7th meeting minutes.
There's a second?
Second,
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, is there any objections to the minutes being approved?
Thank you.
Hearing none. They're approved unanimously.
Just an update on the budget. This is what we presented last month. There's been no changes other than to just update the invoices that were approved at the last building committee meeting. So no changes to the project budget since our last meeting. No comments or
Okay.
questions.
Are there any
Can,
questions on the budget? Hopefully that will be increased.
Yeah. And so last topic tonight. So the review of the subcontractor bids and prep for town meeting on Saturday. So we sent the bid documents to the printers and the trade contractors. We've talked a little bit about the difference between a trade subcontractor and a non-trade subcontractor. Trade subcontractors are required to pre-qualify through a subcommittee. We did that. We presented that last month. We approved that list. Those contractors were allowed to pick up the bids. They submitted their bids on Wednesday of this week through a public procurement process. We're reviewing those bids right now, and we're plugging those into the overall numbers. So we're still tallying those. There's a lot of work to do. After we get those, we have to look at the bid. We have to make sure that they've submitted the correct documentation, their certificate of eligibility to bid on public work, a document called an update statement. They have to submit a bid bond and some other forms, and affidavits. So we're going through all of those and make sure that the bids are legitimate and that they can be accepted. At the same time, there's non-trade subcontract bids. These are the bids that Bond go out and procure directly. Bond sent those to their subcontractors at the same time as we sent ours to the trade subcontractors. They've been coming in. Unfortunately, with the non-trade, it's a little harder. It's not a hard deadline like it is for the trade subcontractors. So they've been coming in a little bit slower. Bond have been reviewing those as they've come in, but again, they just started coming in yesterday. I know they're looking for some more to come in this week and early next week, so they're still working through all their non-trade subcontractors. Overall, we're in and around or a little bit over where we thought we would be. We need to go back to some of these subcontractors. The good thing about the non-trades is we get to go back, negotiate. We do what's called bid scopes. We bring them in, we meet them, we go through their bids in detail. So there's a bit of back and forth with the subcontractors. So I don't want to say too much tonight because there's still some negotiation to go on, and I don't want to give up any of our pricing publicly before we meet these subcontractors and bid with them. I would say on the trade subcontractors, we did a good coverage. We're required to take the low bidder if we have 3 or more bids received. In all of the 13 categories, we received 3 or more bids except for the mechanical category. Unfortunately, we just received 1 bid in that category out of the 7 contractors that we pre-qualified. So again, through the Mass state procurement laws, we can go back and we can actually review the bid. We're over budget on that, so we can review the bid with that subcontractor and try and negotiate, get back to our budget on that trade. So we haven't done that. We just got the bids yesterday. We haven't reached out to that contractor yet, and until we do, I don't think we should publish the actual bid numbers. So that's really an update.
Okay,
Joe, I don't know if you
just
have
to-
anything to add.
Yeah, let me, you want to, just to let you know, we had a meeting this afternoon. I talked to Bond with Steve Mayo, myself, Chief Scory, regarding the bids, and essentially with Bond and with everyone, they feel comfortable with our request for town meeting for $2.5 million. which has gone through before the Finance Committee and has been approved by, and it's favorable action. And we'll be presenting that on Saturday morning. So we want to make sure every one of you are all there Saturday morning, because I'm sure there will be some questions.
Article 2, right, Joe?
I think it's 3, actually.
Is it 3?
I think it's 3
It's in the beginning, yeah.
in the beginning. There's only about 9 anyway.
But
Yeah.
let me tell you, 1 and 2 go pretty quickly.
So that's where we're looking at. Everybody seems to be comfortable with it at this stage. There's some more work to be done, as Shane has indicated, especially with the mechanical person. There's more work to be done, and there's a whole scenario that has to be followed, and we'll be doing that. So that's kind of where we're at. Any questions?
Yeah, quick question. Is there no way after this, after if we get additional funding, to go back out and try to get more bids on any of these? Is it what's one and done, and like, you know, we get one mechanical, it's over what we wanted. Let's say we can't come to terms with that. What do we do?
We then, according to Shane, and we then go to bond, and bond, if, let's just say we negotiate with the one mechanical subcontractor that submitted the bid. We're unable to negotiate with them. We then can go to bond, and they can contact their people and come up with bids on that job as well.
Okay.
And that's how I indicated you can somehow negotiate a bit, but you got to go through this whole process, because Chapter 149A has a whole process you have to, and you don't want to get involved with it too much.
Right. Okay.
You got to go through the whole process.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody have any issues with 2.5 million on Saturday?
I think we already decided that was the number, right? And that's what you want to finish. So I don't think we need to vote or anything.
No, we don't need to vote. I'm just
Right.
wondering if anybody had any other questions or issues.
I think we should go for more. I'm only kidding, Joe.
Yeah, okay. I just fell off my chair. Better click my video off. All right, anybody have any issues, any other questions? Chief Scory?
Town meeting begins at 8, right?
Oh, God, yes.
With bring your coffee, Joe.
Who's bringing the coffee is what I want to know. Chief Scory?
No questions here. No questions, Joe.
All right,
Thank
thank you, Chief. Craig, any questions? I'm just seeing who's here. Chief
I
Sullivan?
think I'm good, thank you.
All right, Chief Sullivan? Yep, he's muted and. All right. Let's make sure we're all there Saturday, I guess. That's where we're at. And in 2 weeks, we'll have an idea of where we are negotiating with that one trade subcontractor, right?
Yes, and hopefully some of Bond's direct subcontractors too.
Yeah, there's what indicated that Dave Capaldo indicated that he was getting some in and some were coming in, and that's why we just don't have any more numbers to provide. So we should be having those in a couple of weeks. Okay. Anybody got anything else?
When's our next meeting, Joe?
2 weeks. The
18th.
18th.
November 18th. Yep.
November 18th.
And that's when we expect to have bills and everything else for this past month.
Correct.
Correct. Yep.
And then we'll have more information on numbers, and we'll probably
I don't think we'll have a GMP by then.
What's that?
I don't think, Shane, we would have a GMP by then, right? By the time we negotiate,
No.
and give somebody a chance to come back with numbers, et cetera, et cetera.
We'll certainly get as close as we can, Chip. Maybe an interim GMP where we just want to release some of the major subs, because we want to start the procurement process as soon as we can. So again, we're going to work over the next 2 weeks to get as many of these numbers shaved down and to where we're confident with releasing the subs. It may not be the overall GMP, but the contract allows us to do interim GMPs if we need to release subs. So we'll know more in 2 weeks' time.
Okay.
All right. Lynn, do you have anything?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right. You're Lynn? Oh.
Thank you.
All right, Lynn.
You got the meeting stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You want to, I was, Chip asked me if I could put it on the screen, and I told him absolutely not computer savvy enough to do that. You might want to, Lynn, if you could send it out to the permanent building committee and to the chiefs and
Sure.
everybody, send that out that we're going to present on Saturday. It's 4 slides. It's mostly talking about the the escalation of cost during the pandemic and what's expected. Since we don't have any hard numbers, we thought it would be appropriate to show what kind of inflation in the construction ministry of 12% and another maybe 5% by et cetera. So Lynn provided all that and she's going to send it out to you. Okay. We'll see you Saturday, I guess. Did I hear?
I move that we adjourn.
There's
Good luck,
a second.
everybody.